Here's today's presentation for severe weather outlooks. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Still staying pretty busy across the northern plains, especially as you're looking at this. We have a level 3 out of 5 severe weather risk through much of central and western North Dakota, northwest South Dakota, parts of Montana, and Wyoming, too. And then a level 2 surrounding that. And interestingly, we have this level 2 here in southwest Missouri and northwest Arkansas and a small sliver of Kansas and Oklahoma. That, by the way, is there just about exclusively because of the tornado risk that was upgraded this morning, late this morning. So that brown area right there is a 2% or a 5% risk rather, and there's a 2% risk of tornado up in that enhanced area, that level 3 area. But we'll zoom in on this. I already did a special video on this for folks in the Ozarks, but this is pretty much aimed at us. So it's a 5% risk of any intensity tornado within a 25-mile radius of any point. Again, that's up from the morning forecast, so I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. NATOcast for today does put that area in a 5% risk, almost exactly where the SPC puts it, and has been doing so for a couple of days now. And up here in the Dakotas, the risk is actually slightly lower unless you get up there into Manitoba. So let's go up there now and take a look at what this really is. Here's the level 3 out of 5 severe weather risk that includes Bismarck and Minot, just north of Rapid City, portions of southeast Montana. And it's a wind bag. It's a wind risk. So we have a 30% chance of a severe wind, 59 miles per hour or greater. This is finally the event that forced me to make these. So the SPC has a new way of estimating severe wind intensity, and they do it with probabilities. So if you're in this striped area here, this is how the wind intensity percentages break down. So still, a wind like this is going to be pretty much in the 85, 86% probability of being somewhere between 50 and 64 knots. But if you get into this area here, it goes up. See, all it does is the same categories of wind in terms of wind speed, but the percentages change. So here, for example, you had only a 10% risk of 65 to 73 knots, and now you get into this area and it goes up to 17%. So that's how that breaks down, just in case you're wondering. NATOcast is, again, equally exuberant about the wind threat, saying there's a 10% chance of a 65 knot or greater wind in this hatched area, and also a 30% chance of any severe wind occurring. So that pretty much matches with the SPC. And on the wind side, CSU is not as excited about that. Oh, there is a little slipper right there of 15%. Hail is a little bit more on the heavier side, percentage-wise. And there's that overall broad tornado risk, which is a little bit higher up in parts of North Dakota than the SPC is indicating, but not by much. Severe thunderstorm risk for Monday shifts to the high plains with a level 2 there in northeast Colorado, parts of western Nebraska, including Cheyenne, Wyoming, too. A little bit of a just level 1, just marginal risk there in the southeast boot heel of Missouri, portions of adjacent areas of Illinois, Indiana, or Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas. There is a tornado risk with this. It's only 2%, but it's out here where the slight risk is area on Monday. And then here is the overall probabilities from CSU. Tornado good agreement, although they mentioned a little bit of activity there in Wisconsin, curiously. But we're talking about 15% hail and wind risk, pretty much adjacent to that slight risk area. Then the action really takes place on Tuesday. Look at this. We have a level 3 out of 5 this many days out. That's saying something. It's for Bismarck, much of central North Dakota, small chunk of South Dakota, level 2, level 1 surrounding that, going all the way down to Kansas. This is part of a pretty energetic wind system moving through the jet stream that will translate this way over the next couple of days. I'll show you that in a minute. CSU has the highest probability of tornadoes, and this is significant, 10% chance up there from Minnesota into parts of North Dakota and South Dakota. So that is something to really keep an eye on. Strong jet stream winds here, and maybe enough of a hint of a low pressure system at the surface to get the winds to cooperate and turn in a way that would encourage tornadoes. Hail and wind threats both show up in the 30% percentile. For generally that same area, the hail's backed up a little bit. Then we move to Wednesday, and again, what I always say, when the SPC on their 4 to 8 day outlooks issues a 30% chance, which is what this is right here, that's pretty meaningful. So this whole thing just shifts basically to the east and slightly to the southeast on Wednesday, with this upper level system still digging in across the plains. So a pretty widespread severe weather event is expected on Wednesday. CSU is putting a 45% chance of any severe weather from the far reaches of northern Wisconsin through the UP of Michigan, centered over Lake Superior. But there's a little tail here of severe weather that is achieving 30% that goes all the way down to northern Missouri. And then here's SPC's corresponding forecast. So actually, I always say that, well, it's true in this case. The CSU forecast always emphasizes areas more north than what SPC usually indicates. So that's the true here. But also in this case, more farther to the south than SPC indicates. So we'll see what actually happens with that. If we use StormNet to look at tornado risk for Wednesday, this is the 12-hour period from 1 p.m. to 1 a.m. This arm right here is what I'll probably chase. I used to live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in this entire area. There is a flat area out here for storm chasing that might be appropriate, but to go all the way up there, especially make that decision today for the chance it might work out as good chasing territory is probably not going to work. But this little arm that extends down into Iowa might be doable. And then we go to Thursday, and the severe weather risk shifts. Chicago's under the gun here. Springfield, Illinois, Quincy, Davenport, Rockford, Madison, Milwaukee, over into Michigan, Grand Rapids, Lansing, stopping just shy of Detroit, down to Fort Wayne, almost to Indianapolis. All under that 15% of any severe weather within 25 miles on Thursday. Here's how CSU paints that picture with a broader brush for sure. That does include more of Missouri and Kansas and Oklahoma, and indeed this forecast right here, which is the SPC's official. I wouldn't be surprised if that were extended more to the southwest as we get closer to the event. Tornado risk on Thursday is centered just south of Chicago. Let's say from Chicago southward to, well, through Kankakee, who had the horrible tornadoes earlier this year, and then back over to Peoria. Not a real high risk, though. It looks like it maybe, if I'm eyeballing that, about a 15 to 20% chance of a tornado using their methods. And then on Friday, this all shifts into the northeast. And finally, the summation of supercell percentages for the next 7 days. Again, by half the time I forget to change the dates on here. Just look right here, June 7th through the 13th. Everything I just said is basically summed up in that graph. But then we go the next 7 days after that. Again, forget that. That's June 14th through the 20th. A little bit of a impulse there around Illinois. You know, it's hard to get focus here. It looks like there is certainly room in this 7 day period for more focused activity in any one of these three areas here. And lots of signs that northwest flow events are starting to set up, like where this is right here. But surprisingly, again, this isn't right. This is the last period of June 21st through 27th. Look at this High Plains supercell index going up for that third week forecast.